بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So inshallah we'll continue from where we left off last lesson. Describing the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It mentions here the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not burden them with more than they can bear. Yet they cannot bear more than what He has burdened them with. This in turn is the explanation of the well-known phrase that there is no power in Allah except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we spoke about this last lesson that whatever really happens within our life, that is all within our possibility of being able to handle that. For example, if someone has lost their parents in an accident or they passed away, right? One person might be able to mentally deal with that calamity or the hardship. But there might be another person who, if they were to experience losing their parents, they would not be able to handle that. Hence, we have people who fall suicidal or people who, because lack of iman results them into feeling suicidal and killing themselves because they think that they can't handle the difficulty Allah put them in. But any difficulty we find ourselves in, then automatically know that we're able to handle that problem or that challenge that we're facing. You know, it could be a marriage issue, that we want to marry someone and our families are not agreeing, and then we get a bit emotional, we get a bit sad, and I'm losing the love of my life, I can't live without her, and then watch too much Bollywood movies and then feel suicidal, right? But this is a reality, and this does happen to people where they do take their lives. Why? Because they think that this is the only way forward for me. If I can't have her or if I can't have him, then I'd rather be dead. But the reality is that difficulty that they're going through is just a temporary pain or temporary challenge that they're facing. What will happen is if they truly put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will know that it's not anything that they can't handle. So if you put in something for a challenge, know that you're ready for it. And if you haven't been put in a challenge, sometimes, for example, your life might be going comfortable, right? And it could be related to anything, and someone else is going through that difficulty, and you're like, man up, deal with it. And because we're not going through it, we think it's easy. But one of the wisdoms could be that we're not going through it because we're going to be in the worst state, the bad guy. So, like for example, it could be like I mentioned about marriage. It's only a year, but get over it. But we haven't been through that difficulty ourselves. Or it could be, someone's getting locked up. They've done a crime together, and one of the lads is getting locked up, and he's like, you gotta ride it, you gotta ride pen, and don't worry. It's easy to say, but the guy who's going in doing the time, he knows how it's like in there. Like they say, big men go and cry in there. Why? Because sometimes it's hard, it's difficult, but you're ready. The only person who can really complain, and the one who lacks strength in his iman. Right? So if you are complaining, and obviously it's human nature to go through difficulties. It's not like that. If you can't deal with the difficulty, you're not ungrateful Muslim or anything. The reality is that the difficulties will come our way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah says, I'm going to test you with the loss of wealth, loss of life, loss of provision, different factors with fear, with hunger. But all these challenges are you're going to face them. Some might get 2 of them, some might get 3 of them, some might get all of them in some aspects. Right? But Allah said, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. But the glad tidings for the person who is patient and deals with them. But the answer at the same time is not like, sabr karo. Someone's going through difficulty, depression, don't want to be patient. Don't want to be patient. Medical help, going to doctors, this is part of the Islamic prescription as well. So it's not only about, just telling someone to man up. Generally, because of this idea that men should deal with the problems is feminine to crime. If you look at the stats of people who are suicidal, more men do suicide than women. Why? Because in the community is understood that it's okay if a woman cries, it's okay if she shares a feeling about her sadness and but if a man cries, imagine one of your friends came to you here and he said, bro, I'm so upset, he starts crying. He said, bro, fix up, what are you doing? This is our attitude. Right? So what happens is, because of the attitude, men try to hide it. And because they try to hide it, then it becomes a form of depression, and hence they end up being suicidal. So the sunnah would be that if someone does come to you in that situation, they're sad, they're going through difficulty, it could be anything, right? Then listen to them, give them time, and try to solve them, support them, and don't do what our cultural idea is. And generally it's a norm in every society that, one of the kids was asking me in class that, I think Zoheb, I think it was, like, if a woman slaps you in public, in Islam, you have to slap them back. Yeah? Eye for an eye, like they say. But can we slap them back? Generally in society, if someone wants to slap you, for example, in public, a woman, the public would consider it a norm. They'd be like, okay, don't hit her back, don't hit her. But if the guy was to slap her back, then everyone would be against him, even though she slapped him first, right? Because it's understood that women, they go through, they can't deal with violence or domestic violence, but it happens the other way around. Like the famous case that's going on, I think it's finished now, with Johnny Depp guy, right? The guy is dealing with abuse from his wife, and these things happen. It's seen to the world that the women can only go through difficulties, but the reality is that men also go through difficulties. But as a believer, our iman is, whatever difficulty comes your way, know it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only reason you're in it is because you can't deal with it. So there's no such thing of being suicidal because you can't deal with the problems. In the Sharia, we're all ready to deal with our problems. Allah has created us like that. Like He said, "La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha." Allah doesn't burden a soul more than that soul can bear. Then He moves on to say, and when you say, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-'aliyyil 'azim," there's no power to do good and no might to stay away from evil. So "La hawla wa la quwwata," normally we say there's no power, no might except Allah. It means no power to do good. So the good we do is from Allah. And the bad that we stay away from is also a strength and ability that Allah has given us to stay away from the bad. So this is how this statement should be understood. There is all matters take place according to His divine knowledge, will and power and decision. So obviously anything that happens is because Allah willed it to happen. How does it come manifest? How does it occur? Because the qudra and the divine power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why it occurs. He said the divine will then has overcome all wills, and the divine decision has surmounted all strategies. Here this is just talking about that, we make plans. I'm going to do this tomorrow, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this mission, whatever it is. And then the total opposite happens. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't will that to happen. Allah didn't want that to happen. We make plans, but Allah makes plans, and Allah is the best of planners. So that's what Allah says. When you say, I'm going to do something, what do you say? I'm going to do so and so tomorrow. You say, inshallah. Yeah, this is from the Quran Kareem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when you plan to do something, then you say, inshallah. So if it happens, it was the will of Allah. If it doesn't happen, it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then either way, as a Muslim, you'll be happy either way. It's not that, when we lack our strength, our iman, and when something doesn't go the way we want it to go, we get very negative, like, it should have been like this, or I wanted it like this, that's how you get into ungratitude, being ungrateful of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you say inshallah, you should know, if it happens, I'm happy because that's what Allah wants. If it doesn't happen, I'm still happy because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And Allah knows that which we do not know. So Allah's ilm is, mentioned in the Quran Kareem that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Perhaps you might like something but it's not good for you. And perhaps you might dislike something but it's good for you. Allah knows and you do not know. Right? So sometimes you think, if I, for example, if I was going to do something and I say, it has to be this way, I'm going to do it like this. And then it doesn't happen the way you want it to happen. Why? Because Allah knows that thing might have been bad for you the way you were perceiving it to be. But you think it's going to be good for you. And something you might think, this is not good for me, I'm going to stay away from it. But in reality, that might be good for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes you might like something or love something, but it's bad for you. And something you might dislike something, but it's good for you. Allah knows, but you do not know. So if things don't go the way you plan, alhamdulillah, there is wisdom in it. I had a friend who wanted to marry someone, and these things people learn through experience, right? And he wanted to marry someone, and then he went through the phase of thinking that, I'm doomed without her, and that's it, I can't survive, I can't marry anyone else. But in that time, she married someone else. So when he spoke to one of the teachers, and sometimes it's just a simple, beautiful, powerful words, and his teacher said to him, why give your heart to someone who's not going to value it? Give it to the one who will never let you down, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we put our heart in the wrong place, for example, we buy a new car, we gas about our car, and then someone, scratches you, or it gets curbed, and then it's wounded inside, you can't go to sleep at night, thinking, you gotta fix it tomorrow. For the youngsters, they buy Eid clothes, they're looking after the trainers, and I've been there, done that, right? And then you got fresh trainers on all day, you're looking after them, and then someone steps on you like, oh bro, you messed my trainers up, and rubbing it. Why? Because we're giving our attachment to the dunya. Right? These things are obviously looking presentable, looking smart, looking after your property is part of it. But when you give too much attachment to these, then you lose touch with reality. So whatever happens, happens with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as you're doing your part, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he mentioned he possesses everything, yet nothing can possess him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing can be independent, free from needing him. Not even for a blink of an eye. So everything that exists, and we discussed this before as well, that Allah is keeping it going at every given moment. If Allah doesn't want it to be, it won't be. So it's not something that Allah created something and they left it. It's still existing is because Allah's keeping it going at that very moment and continuously throughout time. Then he mentions switch from outside. The switch is outside. So then he mentions here that anyone who feels or believes even for a moment that he is not in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's disbelief. That's leads to kufr. Because everyone is in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it can't be possible that we can survive without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then he mentions here that the ability by which an action must occur, such as the divine enablement to obey, i.e. the tawfiq. Say Allah gives tawfiq to worship Him, i.e. the ability to give you the worship. So he's talking about that, I said, which cannot be ascribed to any creature, occurs with that action. That ability that refers to health, capacity, readiness, and sound limbs, however, precedes the action. The same here that, the ability and tawfiq, when we do with our action, whatever we do, right? In reality, the ability and tawfiq, Allah created us and gave us that skill and opportunity. Right? So it's nothing that of our own kamal. In the West we're taught in schools, and against our teaching that one aspect that everything you do in life is because you've done it, you achieved it, because you're deserving of it. And if you don't get it, it's because you brought that upon yourself. This kind of attitude that whatever success you have is only because of your doing. But the reality is, all success is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's nothing of your kamal. Some people, they work, like for example, a person who might have started buying and selling cars, and he sold a few cars. He doesn't know much about cars himself, but he's made a few £1,000. And then on the other hand, there's a guy who's been working a takeaway 12-hour shifts, and it's taking him 6 months to make that money. In reality, who's working harder? The guy in the takeaway. The risk is written for the other person to get it in an easier manner. Like for example, I speak to one of my friends. He sells vans, the small transit vans and all that. And he bought one and he sold it to someone for 10,000. This last week I seen him, he was telling me. And he sold it to someone for £10,000. And the guy came back the next day and said, "Bro, I don't need it anymore. And I need to invest somewhere else. I really need to get rid of this. Buy it for 6,000." So in an overnight, he made 4,000 from a transaction. But that was not because of his doing. That's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made his risk like that. That there's going to be a transaction with the same property. Just changing hands twice and he's going to get the 4,000 back. But on the other hand, that person was meant to use that 4,000. So you have to see both ways. It's not like making the money one way. It's written for that person to use that money. So that was the hukam of Allah, that's the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not that, the guy done him over, or that guy lost out, he's stupid, he could have sold it. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala planned his, transaction like such that he would lose. Because that third person, he could have earned it the haram way. Easy come, easy go, like they say. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made an excuse for that money to go. And hence, so whatever success we have, whatever is all from the tawfiq and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving us the ability to do that. Within our health, within our limbs, whatever ability we have, every single aspect is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then after he mentioned, now he's briefly mentioned about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now he moves on to talking about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says, we also believe that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the chosen servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is selected prophet. His messenger, the one his good and pleasure. And the seal of all prophets, the leader of the pious, the master of all messengers, and the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala among all the worlds. Here is just laying the foundation principle that, when we say, وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, what does that really mean? So when we believe in the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, true iman, would be to believe in all the things that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came with. To believe in he being the final messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone who doesn't believe that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the final messenger, then that is disbelief. You have to believe he is the final messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people have claimed that he is the final messenger, but there will be others who come after him. Right? Like the Qadianis, they are disbelievers. Anyone who believes that any prophet will come after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is kufr, and those, even if they claim to be Muslims, they are not Muslims. Right? So there is the final prophet is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for groups like the Qadiani who openly claimed that to be the Aqidah, they believe that their teacher was the Prophet, one of the Prophet after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is clearly understood to be kufr. But just touching upon this, some people openly say all, like for example, all Shia are kafir, some say all Salafis are kafir, some say Madani are kafir, some open statements like this, right? Wahhabis are kafir. These open statements, this is a sin to do. Because you can't put blanket fatwas on anyone or call anyone a kafir. We have no authority to call anyone a kafir unless that person has done clear-cut kufr. But it won't be that open statement to say all Shia are kafir.
Well, what if someone does a sin but they don't know it's a sin?
Then that person, you inform that person, and if they, for example, no, for example, they say something which is disbelief, for example, right? And you say to him, look, actually, like someone says, I believe more prophets are going to come. Prophet Muhammad is not the last prophet, and so on, right? And then you clarify to the person, this is the correct belief. He is the last prophet. No prophet will come up after him. Now, after knowing the fact, then he rejects. Then you can say, but still you should avoid saying to someone, you're a kafir. You know, people do that. You can say, this statement that you're saying is kufr. Don't say this statement, don't believe this statement. But labeling someone as a kafir is something we should be clearly avoiding. Unless obviously they clearly are a disbeliever, like they reject Islam, clear cut. Then obviously you're not going to say, you're a Muslim. But a person who claims to be a Muslim and then he's got some doubts in his belief or he's unsure about things, you can't call that person a kafir unless they've clearly said, look, even after you're telling me, I still don't agree to you, I still believe so and so, and then a kufr statement could be on that person or that belief that they hold. Right? So that's something important to keep in mind. Like for example, the movie that came out in the cinema, The Lady of Heaven, right? Insulting the Sahaba Ikram, insulting Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, you're calling them kufr, kafirs, right? Put statements of kufr on them. And they were enemies of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq and so on. Now, people who went to this protest, they were like, Shia kafir, Shia kafir, Shia. You can't label all of every single Shia as a kafir. Because within Shia, there's those who hold those beliefs. You say, okay, those beliefs are kafir, whoever has them, that's kufr. But then within the Shia, there will be those who have more Sunni kind of beliefs. Only one, two things will be that don't lie in Sunni Aqidah. Those Shias won't be kafirs. So saying open statements is totally not allowed. Yeah? So you need to keep those statements in mind. But generally, anyone who rejects the Prophet ﷺ being the last and final messenger, then that would be kufr. And he is the leader of all the other prophets. He is the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then every claim of prophecy after him is heresy and utter disbelief, which we already discussed. He is one sent to the truth and guidance to all jinn. So the guidance is not only for human beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran the guidance for jinn and insan. So it's not, so within the jinn there's believing jinns and disbelieving jinns. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came as a mercy to all of creation in general. He came to a mercy to all creation. But the guidance he came for, it wasn't only for human beings. The guidance is for, I'm just laughing because I told him to highlight. I always highlight the whole book. Alhamdulillah, at least he considered all of it important.
MashaAllah.
Few points, MashaAllah. So it's important that we keep this in mind. Next, it mentions here that miracles do occur at the hands of prophets. Now at the top of 27, on the white book, yeah? On the top of 27. There says, Allah manifested clear miracles to verify the prophecy of His message, such as the splitting of the moon, the walking of trees, the trees giving salam to the Prophet, the stones giving salam to the Prophet and his informing of the unseen realm. So here is telling us that miracles occurred at the hand of the Prophet for various reasons. And some of the reasons were to strengthen people's iman. And generally, one of the attitudes of the disbelievers was, they were always like, prove it, you're a prophet. And when the Prophet would prove it, they still would reject it. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ. They have a seal on their hearts, on their ears, the eye, they're dumb, deaf and blind. Why? Because even though they can see the truth, they're as if they're blind to the truth. They hear the Quran Kareem and they know deep down is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they openly reject the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not that Allah put the seal on, because someone would say that if Allah put the seal on their hearts, it's not their fault, they're kafirs. But the kufr, they're so firm in the kufr. You know, like when something, like, you know, when you say like, you're 100% going to do something and they say, consider it done. It's not actually done, right? But you're saying that, like, I'm definitely going to do this thing, consider it done. As if that you've already done it. So Allah saying, telling us through, Allah's ilm is unlimited, so He knows what hal they're going to die in anyway. So when Allah says they have, in their seal and their hearts, they're dumb, deaf and blind, it's because Allah knows that they're never going to accept. Even after seeing the miracles of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet sallallahu did the miracles, what did they say? He's just a kahin, he's just a magician, he's deceiving people, he's tricking people. Na'udhu billah min dhalik. So miracles did occur at the hand of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We believe that the Quran is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any, you know, this the Quran Kareem, no sentence of the Quran Kareem can be rejected. You know, sometimes, and I'll tell you how this can happen, and it happens now, how the disbelievers, you know, how they brainwash our youngsters and make them say statements of kufr, for example. You know, it might be with, for example, with women, when, and this happens like, for example, previous women that have strong iman, they knew that Allah said in the Quran, men can marry 4 times, right? So women of the past, naturally of a woman's nature is she doesn't want to share her husband. So she might get upset. She's going to be upset, she's going to be angry, she's going to be sad. That's standard, right? But they still never rejected that ruling of the Quran. They said, look, I'm never going to let my husband marry. I know it's halal, I know it's permissible, but he's not allowed to marry. And if he did, she'd be content that look, it's hukum of Allah, he's allowed, but she'll be upset with him. I'm not talking to you, how dare you do that? You know, I really want you for myself, I don't want to share you. But now, how the Western mind is being programmed, young women, and I've heard this from my own ears, that they say, we don't agree to this. So when they are brainwashed to believe that it's, we're not, you know, a man is not allowed to marry more than once, you know, how can we share our husband? You know, the brainwash in such a way that those women end up rejecting the ayah of the Quran. So traditionally the women were like, look, we agree to the Quran, it's there, but I don't want my husband to do it. Now the statements these young women are saying, this is one example, it can happen with anything, right? The young women are saying, I don't agree to that. I don't agree to men marrying, i.e. I don't agree to the hukum of Allah. So that's kufr. So they indirectly make you reject the Quran. And this is what happens in, you know, with anything, with this, for example, with this LGBT thing. People try to brush it under the carpet. Someone's gonna say this to us, or they're gonna call us homophobic for, you know, about being gay and lesbian and stuff. They're gonna be against us, and they're gonna say we're homophobic and this and no, be straight up. I'm a Muslim, I believe in the Quran, and the Sharia says it's haram. 100%, no matter what you say, call me homophobic, I'm quoting the Sharia to you, and the Sharia says it's haram, so I'm with the opinion, it's impermissible and it's wrong. You can say what you want. This should be our stance. It shouldn't be, oh, you know, people in society, or I'm a public speaker, or I'm a teacher in school, I need to be mild down in my opinions. No. This is how they're going to rob our iman. It's not going to be, you're going to wake up one morning and you'll be like, you know, actually I don't believe in Islam. It's going to be subtly that they remove our iman. They're going to make you reject the verses of the Quran, which indirectly makes you a kafir. So this is how our iman will be slowly stolen. So we need to, you know, stay alert, especially when it comes to rulings within the Quran Kareem. So here, whatever the Prophet ﷺ came with revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe is the truth. And we are certain that it is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not a speech that is created. Okay, the Quran is not a makhluk, it's not created. It's the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we mentioned about the attribute that the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from sounds and words. And then he mentioned, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all creatures as well as their actions. He measured out their livelihood, their lifespans. Everyone fully receives his own portion of sustenance, whether lawful or unlawful. You know, the word rizq, I just want to touch on this, the other part is straightforward. You know the word rizq, you say this is rizq from Allah. You eating haram, that will still be rizq as well. The rizq includes halal and haram. It's what you consume or what you use that is still considered to be your rizq. But you're responsible how you gain that, the acquisition. Allah will still provide you, like I mentioned last time. You go to the halal way, you go to the haram way, Allah will still give you. But you're responsible for taking the haram route. So you can't say, for example, imagine someone, sells drugs and he's bought a car, he's bought a house, he's buying food for his family and all that. And you say, you can't say that is not risk. Allah is still providing him that. He might have got it through haram means. So he is responsible for the gunnah he's done. But if someone was to ask you, who is providing him all this, what are we going to say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it does come under risk. So risk includes halal and haram. Risk is not only referred to money, by the way. Risk includes your awlad, your children. Risk includes your shelter, your clothing, your family. All this is a means of risk paid from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And similarly, everyone completes his own appointed lifespan. And in its entirety, hence, one who is killed dies at the time of the end of his lifespan. And this is entirely those who came to the dhikr yesterday. I mentioned the hadith about, when we say love, only if, someone, for example, for example, he got into a fight with one of his boys, they went out, they got into a fight, someone got stabbed, he got killed, and then someone's like, if you didn't link their man's up, then that wouldn't have happened. No, his death was written, it was gonna happen. There's no ifs and buts. The way you die is the way Allah has written for you to die. There's no such thing as if this, if that. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which I mentioned yesterday, that if opens the door of shaitan. Right? If is a statement of shaitan. We as Muslims, we say, whatever happened, happened with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ma sha'a fa'ala. Whatever He willed, that's what happened. Simple. We can learn lessons from those experiences. We can tell, like for example, one of my relatives, he passed away. He got struck by lightning. This is when I was about 16. And they went to the park and they were playing football, cricket in the park. And I remember it was Saturday about 6 o'clock. And they were playing cricket in the park, right? And just all the lads just linked up. It started raining, like proper fast. And they were under the tree. Bang, lightning hit the tree. And one of my cousins, when I got to Jannah, he passed away. And, but people were like, oh, if they didn't go under the tree, this would have happened. No, if he was going to be struck by lightning, if he was walking home or running home, he would have been struck on the way. Either way, his death was written like that. Right? So there's no such thing as if this, if that. Another lesson for the youngsters from the Ascent story is, when I went to his janazah, sometimes, you consider certain people to be our boys, right? And when I went to his janazah and the boys were like, Saqib, what should we read, what should we read? And these are the things that kind of encouraged me to go towards Islam a bit more. Is because the boys were like, and I remember that his body being in front of us. And the boys are like, Saqib, what should we read? And that really hit me because that was like, those guys who chill with you on the road, chill with you in school, we were in year 11, we just left school then. And we say, these are my boys, they're going to be back me all the time. Like, youngsters, we say that, right? If I get into beef, I'm basically like, Ali's got me, Ali's got me. And then when it comes to reality, you might run away, right? But the reality is that the true boys are the ones that when you're dead, when you pass away, what are they going to do for you then? Are they going to be writing Facebook posts, RIP, RIP? or they're actually going to be raising their hands and do dua for you? Are they going to be at your, in front of your coffin and making dua, Allahumma gfirli hayyina wa mayyitina, or are they going to be there and go watch the read? And then, not knowing on the spot, and just stand there and think, I don't know nothing, I'm just standing here. Inside, knowing that I'm a joke, I'm standing here, I don't even know what to pray for my mate. And this happens, so sometimes we should readjust our thinking, our company. The Prophet ﷺ said it's better to be alone than be in bad company. And then it's better to be in good company than be alone. So inshallah, pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us tawfiq to ponder about these few verses. These few ayat that we recited and the lessons that we learned from these few paragraphs. We shall just move on to the fiqh on page number 45. Muslims on it has been revising. So page 45, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So last time we left off was those things which are makruh in wudu.
Got some questions for me.
So if you just want to answer those questions, ask the questions, and then I'll address them.
Got a couple of questions from the students. First question is that if you class someone as a kafir and you tell other people without proof, are you classed as a kafir, or what are you classed as? That's the first question.
Okay, so generally there's a statement that if you label someone as a kafir and they're not, then one of you die in kufr. I.e., but this is just emphasizes the point that when you label someone as a kafir, it is a major sin. Without evidence, without proof. One is clear cut, someone says I don't believe in God. Obviously the kafir. Now someone says I'm a Muslim, I'm a Sunni Muslim, I believe. And then you got 1-2 issues within Islamic, issues, and then you say, you're a kafir. That is unacceptable. You are sinful and you need to do tawbah if you're in that position. So if someone finds himself and you have labeled someone as a kafir for the statements, right? You address that statement. If someone might have said something kufr, for example, right? You address it, you talk to them, and then you clarify it. If they're still firm on it, actually that's what I believe, that's how it's like. And it's clear cut kufr, then you can say that statement is kufr. If you buy it, if you hold by it, stand by it, then obviously that will apply to you. If you don't, you do tawbah, then I accept and I won't label you as, you've done kufr and you're still a believer.
Another question was from the students that talking about the finality of the Prophet, the Khatam al-Nabuwa. In the last days, the Prophet Islam is said to come after, is going to come in the last days. Could you elaborate on this?
So generally, the end of times, the Dajjal and all these youngsters normally research about Qiyamah only, right? Just touching upon that, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Mata Sa'a? Ya Rasulullah, when is the day of judgment? He didn't answer with so-and-so day, so-and-so time. He said, what have you prepared for the day of judgment? So a lot of youngsters, whenever they look into deen, the first question they ask me in Islamic world will be, tell me about Ya'juj and Ma'juj, tell me about your Dajjal, what's happening. But the reality is, what have you prepared? We know that there is a haqiqah, there is a reality, what have you prepared for it? In regards to your question about Isa coming towards the end of time, he will come as a follower of ummati of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's not going to come with a new message. Right? The Prophet ﷺ still is the final messenger, so he's going to come as a follower of ummati of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So hence the Prophet ﷺ is still the last and final messenger. And just touching on that, Prophet Isa ﷺ wasn't killed on the cross. He wasn't crucified. That's a Christian understanding. The Prophet Isa ﷺ, he was raised to the heavens. He didn't die at that time.
Another question is that could you we heard that Imam Shafi radhiyallahu anhu was sent to prison for saying that the Quran is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is this correct?
I'll double check that. I need to double check that. So those we know that previous and there be technical differences. It's not exactly saying that the book Quran we have that people understand. The written Quran we have, that is, and so So it's a technicality about the understanding. So the Quran is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes some believe some have said that it's makhluk, the Quran is created. Right? The Quran is not created. It's not. It's the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ulama who spoke against and said it is the divine speech of Allah, and others who said no, it's created, then we know those ulama, they were imprisoned, and great ulama, they were dragged in the streets, they were shackled to animals, and dragged in the streets, they were imprisoned. So this is part of the history of great leaders, great ulama being imprisoned for standing up for the deen. So this is something we have to be ready for that, inshallah.
So
this is the time of fitna when they try to say that Quran is makhluk, so it will get old and that's it, it's not suitable for. And that's when Imam Shafi'i actually he did
Yes.
get to the prison because he actually insists that it's Kalamullah. And it's not just Shafi'i, there was few times.
Yes. So generally, I don't know, I can't remember the waqia of Imam Shafi'i from the top of my mind, but I know there has been this opinion that the Quran is created and is part of creation, where the ulama said the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ghair makhluk, is not creation, and hence they've been punished or imprisoned for that. So that did happen in history. So moving on to the fiqh, inshallah. So it says the legal reason for performing wudu. So now we've done the farda wudu, the sunnah wudu, the nafal, the mustahaba wudu, those things which are makruh wudu. Now they say, why do you actually need wudu in the first place? What things do you need wudu for? So it said the legal reason for performing wudu is two main things: praying the salah and touching the Quran. So touching the mushaf, touching the Quran is one of the reasons why we need wudu, and the other reason is for reading salah. As in touching the Quran, just elaborate on this with advanced Quran technology. The ulama have, obviously we have phones now, we have Quran on our phones and so on. So the ulama mentioned that touching the Quran on the phone, touching the actual letter, they have the arrows on the side, touching the arrows, touching the text itself, the stronger opinion is that it still requires wudu out of other of the Quran Kareem. Whereas others have said, no, it's just pixels on the screen and you press the next button and they go away and so on. But the correct other, and especially for the coming generations, is that you need wudu to touch it, even if it's on the screen, if it's on a poster, ayahs written on a board, for example, like here, for example, there's an ayah, touching it, you still should have wudu. Why? It keeps us in practice of other of the Quran. Because what will happen over time, if people go with the more relaxed and lenient opinions, oh, this is allowed, that's allowed, that's allowed, then at the end of the day, we have nothing of our deen left. Right? So you find, unfortunately, weird and wonderful opinions that are out there which make anything and everything halal. Fatwa of alcohol being halal, fatwa of eating from KFC, not just the Mackey's Philly burgers, but all types of chicken is allowed, all types of beef burgers allowed, and people are going KFC, McDonald's eating chicken and beef burgers, and following weak opinions. This is still prohibited, it's not allowed. Right? So, people try to find all these opinions, but stick to be firm in our deen. Just having a burger from KFC or McDonald's, it's not the end of your life. But it's a sign, it's going to weaken your iman. It's going to weaken your spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you should be avoiding. There's countless places in Bury Park, but still you get all the Pakistanis lining up outside the Mackey's over there just for a Philly burger. But there's enough halal and decent places in Luton to eat halal food. And unfortunately, we still try to go for those things which are doubtful. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, anything you got doubt in it, leave that thing. Yeah? So we should leave those kind of things. So those people who say, no, you can touch the Quran without wuzu and this and that, those, the general stance is, you need wudu to touch the Quran, be on your phone, be on the mushaf itself. And for reading salah, you need wudu. Doing tawaf of the Kaaba, you need wudu. But the two main things that normally the books discuss, they put the tawaf under wajib, but the fourth one they put is touching the Quran and reading namaz. These two things you need to have wudu. And then they also mention here that another reason could be that the hukam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the time of prayer is about to end, the expiation of that time, then now you have to do it. Like for example, Zohar starts at 1 o'clock. You got to 6 o'clock to read the namaz. Is it fard for you or 1 o'clock to read it? No. It's still fard for you to read it between 1 to 6. But now it's 5:55. There's only 5 minutes left. The only time for you to read namaz. Now it's hard for you to read it ASAP. Do your wudu and read your salah ASAP. Otherwise you're going to miss your salah. So now the hukam is on you without the leniency, I've got 10 minutes or I've got some time. No. The hukam applies there and then. You go for it there and then. Now they mention that those conditions that make you legally responsible. Everything has application. You can't just apply every rule and everywhere. And for example, reading the namaz is fard. Now you grab a 2-year-old baby and you say, the namaz is fard, you're Muslim, read namaz. No. There must be a certain condition for wudu, certain conditions for salah. Every form of ibadah has conditions. It can't be that it's without conditions. So the condition for wudu, first is being a Muslim. So if a kafir was holding the Quran, you don't need to say to him that you do your wudu to touch the Quran. But us as Muslims, we need to do wudu. Right, to touch the Quran. For a kafir, you won't need to. And minimum you need to say to him is make sure your hands are clean, make sure you purify your hands, you're not touching the Quran and with impurity. Obviously he doesn't believe in the Quran in the first place, so for him there's no such thing as pure or impure. So the wudu, the hukm of wudu is for a Muslim, a person who's gone through puberty. Islamically, for a woman who's starting a period, that's puberty, and for a boy, a male, who's experienced a wet dream. These two things make you an adult Islamically. Right? That's called puberty Islamically. If that doesn't happen to anyone, then 14 and a half English years, 15 Islamic years, but 14 and a half English years make you an adult automatically. So someone who hasn't experienced a dream at night that makes him baligh, and now he's 16 years old, he's like, my hand is soft, I don't need to read namaz. No. 14 and a half, straight away is fine. But the Prophet ﷺ said, teach your children from 7 years old, and by 10 they should be reading their namaz. Otherwise, physically make them and read them namaz. So, first condition for wudu is being Muslim. Second is going through puberty, which I mentioned. And third is being sane. You can't be a person who mentally not well. He has to be mentally present. And fourth is for termination of menstruation, postnatal, or any state of ritual impurity. So that thing which made you impure in the first place, that needs to end basically. Okay, so if a woman who's going through a monthly cycle, now she's on for 4, 5, 7 days, right? When that ends, then she can do wudu. If she's still going through a monthly cycle, then she can't obviously do wudu, she's still impure. So even if she does wudu actually doesn't count in that sense. Or the state of ritual impurity has ended. Okay, so whatever is causing you to become impure, that has ended. Having access to water, sufficient water. They mention the word sufficient for a reason here. Now, for example, if someone who doesn't have water, obviously they don't need to do wudu. They do tayammum, right? Now, imagine you're traveling and you're still halfway through your journey. You got some water with you, but that water is for drinking. You know that you need that water for drinking. If you use that water, then you're going to suffer. So now you don't need to use that water for the wudu. You still do tayammum, even if you got some water with you. So that's what they mentioned, the extra note. Having access to and the ability to use sufficient water. So you have to have sufficient, and you have to have tawfiq to use the water in the first place, and you need to have access to it as well. So for example, if someone has water and he said, I'm not giving you, obviously you don't have access to water. So even though it's right in front of your face, you still do tayammum, because the person is not letting you use the water. So you have to have access to water to do wudu, ability to perform the salah. So if, for example, doing wudu for salah will only be for those people who can actually do the namaz. Right? If you can't actually have the ability to pray the salah, then you read the salah, for example, ishara, you're on a deathbed, you're reading with your eyes, if you're really weak, or if you're reading with your head by nodding. If you can't even get up to pray salah or even sit up, then obviously you can't go to the wudu. So hence, the wudu won't apply to that person. And then the other one I already mentioned, running out of time, that will make the wudu necessary for a person. So if any of these things don't apply, wudu is not fard on that person. Now, keeping in mind, he says you have puberty, right? And someone might be thinking that I don't need to do wudu. You still need to teach your children to do wudu, even if they're 5 years old. Because that's how they're going to understand the importance of wudu for salah. If you're like, he's 5 years old. I'll give you an example how you brush it under the carpet. For example, the child, you told him to do wudu. He doesn't need to do wudu, he's 5 years old. You told him to do wudu for namaz. He done his wudu, and now you know that he's done something that broke his wudu. But he doesn't know. But he knows that I've done my wudu. You let it be. Because you know that if I tell him to go do wudu again, he's going to waste his time, he's going to miss his namaz anyway, and he's going to waste water, he's going to be shitting around in the wudu area, which happens with some kids here in Masjid, right? Then you brush him the carpet as if you don't know. But you know that, and he knows that he's done his wudu. That's for a child. But those who get elder, 12, 10, 12, 13, then they should be definitely doing, especially at the age of 10, you should be definitely doing wudu. There's no excuse for not doing wudu. Next he mentions here, there's some conditions that make your wudu valid. Now these are the first one, the condition for who is qualified to do wudu. Now we're going to mention conditions that make your wudu complete. It makes it valid. First one they mention is using pure water that can purify you to cover the full area that needs to be washed. So that part which is far to wash, it needs to be covered completely. If it's not covered completely, then your wudu is invalid. That's the first thing they mention. That is the fourth part of wudu we're talking about. Then he mentions here the second, removing anything that blocks water from reaching the skin. For example, you're wearing a tight ring. Now, wearing a tight ring, the water won't go underneath. So you need to remove that ring. If you don't remove that ring, your wudu is incomplete. Another thing which is very common is, for example, women wear makeup. And they don't want the makeup to get ruined and this and that. So that will stop the water touching the skin. Wudu is incomplete without that. So hence, it's become a trend. Women go to weddings and don't read namaz because my makeup is going to come off, because I wash my face. So they abandon the salah altogether. And this is haram. If you know, for example, I'm going to this wedding, I'm putting this makeup on, I can't hold my wudu. I've got a problem, my wudu is 100% going to break before namaz, then that person is sinful for not doing the wudu for salah and keeping the makeup on. And that's what happens. And be the bride, be whoever it is, salah is fard. Right? So this is important. Another common scenario is, people who go, women, these men go out to get manicures and pedicures, alright? But when they go to the salons, and even if it's clear, nail polish, sometimes they just put clear one and they don't put, but it builds a layer on top of your nails. The water is not touching your nail, which is far to wash. So hence, your wudu is still incomplete. So this is something you need to keep in mind as well. Okay, so these things are very, very important, and we need to, address them to those who are married, who have partners, to, inshallah, shed some light on this to the family members.
Brother, what about stuff like ink? So say you've got like pen markers on your hand, will that count as well?
So things like, for example, ink. That's good you asked. This is an important point I want to mention about this. That ink, it doesn't count. Why? Because it really goes inside the skin. Even when you wash your hand, you're washing the skin, but it's kind of gone inside your pores. So your wudu still will be done with just pen marks and stuff like that. Things which don't count though and which make your wudu invalid is paint. Because they actually form a layer on top of your skin. So you know the tattoos kids do? When they get chewing gum and their tattoo comes out, that builds a layer on top of the skin. So that kind of tattoo will make the wudu incomplete. But whereas a permanent tattoo which is into your skin, your wudu will still be valid, your ghusl still be valid. Right? That's into. Obviously, there's other rulings as haram and so on, doing tattoos. But imagine someone has done it. Imagine someone was in ignorance, they didn't pray the salah, and then they did tawbah, and now they've got inks. And people see them, especially our Pakistani community, we got this negative attitude. They see a guy with tattoos come to the masjid and they look at this gangster. Yeah? He comes to doesn't even know tattoos are haram. How do you know he could have just become a new Muslim? How do you know this person could have done tawbah from his gunah and now he's coming to purify himself? You see someone with tattoos in the mosque, you say, Alhamdulillah, Allah's giving him guidance. You don't say, Astaghfirullah, look what you're wearing, bro. Or people do like sunnah is to cover your body for salah, sunnah is to cover your hair. And then someone comes to salah and they're wearing 3/4, for example, they're wearing a t-shirt, you're like, Astaghfirullah, don't you know the adab of coming to the masjid? How do you know what hardship these guys come through? What gунah he's been in, what difficulty he's been in. And now Allah showed him the light of the deen, and now you're blasting him with fatwas. You can't read namaz like this, you need a topi, you need this. This does not apply to you guys are on the deen, yeah? Oasis making to do that, I'm chilling. For youngsters who are in the deen, you should try to adopt the sunnah. But this changes culturally as well. You have to keep this adab in mind as well. Like for example, brother, which country are you from? Palestine. So in Palestine and Morocco, it's a culture because of the heat to wear sleeveless. Right? So in their culture, that is not considered bad adab in salah. Whereas in Pakistan, is considered bad adab to show your arms in salah. So rulings slightly change according to the area. So you have to keep this understanding in mind as well. So if you're in a community where something is considered bad adab, right? Like if, for example, I was to travel to Pakistan and not do those things which are considered bad adab in that community, then it's makruh for me to do that. But in a community where like UK is mixed, then you can't say, I can't throw my cultural adab. It's not wrong, Islamically is allowed, but it's still adab to apply on someone else. Right? For example, a non-Muslim, a revert, a British-born white person who comes to Islam, and all his life he wore t-shirts, and you say to him, cover yourself like this, don't you know the adab of salah and this and that. Now you're driving him away from the deen. So the Sharia has applications as well. So anything that's covering your skin will not complete your wudu. And then the last point I mentioned here, that anything is that breaking your wudu, if that is still happening, obviously you can't do wudu. For example, your nose is you have a nosebleed, you have a cut, which is the blood is continuously coming out. You do wudu, blood is still coming out, so obviously your wudu will not count until that thing that is breaking your wudu has stopped. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq to implement these rulings, inshaAllah. So inshallah, we'll make this start on the next book. We'll keep it brief, inshallah. So last lesson we mentioned, starting inshallah page number 25. So last lesson we spoke about the 3 types of students. The first type who only study for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second type of student is the one who studies deen, but at the same time he's doing it to get worldly benefit. People are going to say he's Shia, people are going to say he knows so much about Islam, he's very religious and so on. But he knows he's doing it wrong. His intentions are wrong. So there's a chance for that person to do tawbah. And the third one who's just purely doing for worldly benefit. And then that person is from the losers, from the khasirin. Why? How can you learn deen for only for worldly benefit? For example, a non-Muslim wants to marry a Muslim woman, right? So he'll learn and practice this, try to pick up the deen, or someone wants to marry someone and they say, if you're not practicing, you can't marry our daughter. So what does he do? He joins a few fiqh classes and then he's like, I'm on the deen. He shows them a few snaps like in the masjid, and then they say, MashaAllah, he's on the deen, and then they give the rishta, and then the namaz goes. This has happened to countless innocent women. I have sisters who want to marry a practicing brother. He thinks she's pretty. He shows her that he's on the deen, and then they get married, and then he just oppresses her, does dhulm on her because he's not practicing. And I know one of the local lads, our brother was telling me, now what he did was, he came across to a woman that religious, she was like on the deen, she's doing the Ali course and stuff, and he came across to her as religious, that he wanted to marry her, that's why. So he told her he's on the deen, I'm practicing, I'm trying, and so on. And then they got married there. This is a few weeks later, cops are beating down his door, they found 10 ounces in his wardrobe, right? So he got busted selling drugs, and she obviously now she's in any car, she's stuck in a marriage. So that can happen. So there are people who deceive our sisters out there. I could do the other way around. The guy wants to, the woman wants to marry the guy, and he said, I want someone on the deen. She comes across on the deen, and they're practicing. And then when they get married, she doesn't pray her salah, she's not practicing, and then obviously marriage break down like that. Then at the end, he just finishes off the last paragraph, he didn't have the last time. He just mentions that I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us from the first type and not the third type. The first type to learn only for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dunya that you get with it, the wealth that you get through deen, that's a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But our goals should still be for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what happens? Unfortunately, in this kind of climate we live, imams in mosques are not paid enough. So when they're not paid enough, are living standing wage, right? Then when they try to do religious things, in their mind they want money. Because they need to feed the family. But like for example, they're going to do a nikah. If an imam was paid enough from the masjid, his employee, when he's going to do the nikah, he'll be like, I'm going to fulfill the sunnah of the Prophet, I'm going to do it for the deen. But what happens is, when imams are just from hand to mouth basically, right? Just surviving. So when they go to do a nikah, back of the mind is, I hope to pay me. So it kind of brings the worldly aspect to sunnah ibadah, which is a duty upon the imam, Muslims to read another Muslim's nikah. So these kind of things can happen, but it's not because the person is after money, it's because financially he's in a position that he needs money to survive. So he uses his deen. For example, someone who teaches Quran and gets paid for it, it's not because he's doing it for the money, but he needs to feed his family. Some people say it's haram to charge for Quran. The teachers do not charge for the Quran because there's no value for Quran. They charge for the time they're giving. Because if they're spending 10 hours teaching Quran, and you're like, do it for the sake of Allah, brother, it's the word of Allah. How is he going to feed his family for 10 hours giving dawah to you guys? So he has to obviously provide for his family, and so he's allowed to charge for his time, not for the Quran Kareem. So this doesn't mean that if you're doing purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can't get any worldly benefit. You will get, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the one who goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala walking, Allah will go to him running. Right? So this is one blessing that Allah will open up to the person. And then in part 1 of the book, that was his intro, getting you ready for the book, that first fix up and then we'll discuss the book. So that's what Imam Ghazali has done here. And if you look at the text itself, right, it's not like normal books that we read, when they say a good Muslim should do this is a thing to do. No. When Imam Ghazali talks, he's talking to you as a reader. Look, the first thing he says, Ilm, know that. So he's telling you, like basically Ilm is a commanding, is an amr. Amr is done to a person who's present. Like if I say hit him, I'm not going to say to a guy who's not present, right? That's a command. So ilm here is a command. He's saying no as a command, right? So we know that Imam Ghazali is talking to us direct. He said, ilm anna awamir Allah ta'ala fara'id wa nawafil. He says, no, the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's farz and there's nafil. Generally speaking, you know, sunnah, muakkada, sunnah, ghair muakkada. Anything apart from farz falls into nafil. Then nafil has sunnah muakkada, sunnah ghair muakkada. Generally the word nafil is used for sunnah as well. That's something to understand, that's why he's mentioned here. So he says, the commands of Allah are the farz or the nafil. Then he says, وَالْفَرْضُ رَأْسُ الْمَالِ بِهِ تَحْصُلُ النَّجَاةِ وَالنَّفْلُ هُوَ الرِّبْحُ وَبِهِ الْفَوْزُ بِالدَّرَجَاتِ. He said that, you know, the fard is like the investment. You know, when, for example, people buy Bitcoin, right? And they put $1 grand in Bitcoin. That £1,000 you invested, that is your fard. The nafil is the profit you're going to make on top. So it's the fruit, like they say, the cherry on the cake. So it's the extra things is your nafil ibadah, i.e. the sunnahs, they are a bonus on top of your fard. The fard is the actual raqsul mal, the actual investment you're putting in, the thing that you need to put down on the table, like they say, right? So then he says that the voluntary acts are the profit by which are reached to high levels of success. And then he says, وَالْفَوْزُ بِالدَّرَجَاتِ. Fawz is like success, through which he gets success. Then he mentions that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who draw near to me, do not draw near to me with anything better than the acts that are made fard upon him. And the servant continues to draw near to me through nafal acts until I love him. And this is, we've done it not last Thursday. Last Thursday, now the dhikr we came across this hadith that we talked about the dance on Thursday. It says, مَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ الْمُتَقَرِّبُونَ بِمِثْلِ أَدَاءِ مَا افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِمْ. That a person doesn't draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the fard. So the best way to get Allah's closeness is basically doing your fard actions. That is the best way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he said, وَلَا يَزَالُ الْعَبْدُ يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. And the person gets closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more closer on top of the fard, right? The fard is the first thing that makes you close to Allah. And the best way to get close to Allah. And then on top of that, the way to get more closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through your nafal action, i.e. your sunnahs. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. Right? It says, حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. This is Hadith al-Qudsi where Allah says, until I love that person when he does his nafal. وَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ كُنْتُ سَمْعَهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ وَبَصَرَهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ وَلِسَانَهُ الَّذِي يَنْطِقُ بِهِ وَيَدَهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا وَرِجْلَهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا. And then he says that a person, so first he does his fard, closest way to get to Allah. Then the nafal and sunnah are what gets him the extra closer to Allah. And he continues to do his sunnah and nafal until Allah loves him. So the sunnah and nafal, you know, people say it's only a sunnah, bro, like I mentioned, right? Those people, that statement is dangerous. That draws you away from the closeness to Allah. So if you truly want to get closer to Allah, hold on to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then when Allah loves you, what happens? He says, I become the eyes and the ears with which you hear with. And then I become the sight with which you see with. I become the tongue with which you speak with. I become the hand with which you grasp with. I become the feet with which you walk with. I.e., your limbs, they get a form of barakah in them. And we know that, you know, if you ponder about even scientifically, right, there's certain things that we can hear with our ears, which is like you're hearing my voice, any practical sound that you guys can hear, right? Then there's sounds out there which we can't hear. Which, like for example, sounds like if they say I think it's a dolphin or a whale or something, the sound, their voice goes miles away and it can be heard. But it only can be detected with a device, for example, right? Then there's limits on our eyes, for example. We can see our hand apparently. You get an X-ray machine, you can see our bones. You get an MRI machine, you can see our muscles and the bloodstream and so on, right? The different. So there is ability to see within the hand. There is. So when you say you sit with the man of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you sit with the alim, you control your tongue. You sit with the awliya, you control your heart. Why? Because Allah gives them, basira, basically, inner sight. So your eyes become, there's no limitations. So you can see through the world. We know the Prophet, one of the Sahaba, when the armies were in a different city, and it said, Ya Sa'id al-Jabal. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he was sitting and giving khutbah. And they said, who are you addressing? I'm addressing the army so far away in a different city. Right? Miles away. And he's addressing them and the people in the gathering are thinking, who is he talking to? Why? Because he worshipped Allah through the sunnah on top of his farm. So much that Allah put blessings in his barakah in his sight that he was seeing past the cities and mountains. And he could see what's happening in the battlefield. And he could guide them win the battle like this, sitting where he was. Why? So Allah puts barakah in our movements. Allah puts barakah in our walking. Our walking becomes a form of blessing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that like for example, some people they walk a long distance, right? And they walk in a short amount of time span. How could they, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went on the night of Mi'raj. He traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem in a short portion of the night. Why? Because of his maqam with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah put, they say time is relevant. And this can happen. Like for example, dreams we have. And they normally say a dream, you went here and you've done this, you've done that, you've done a mission, you got married, you've done this. So much happens in a dream, right? And literally a dream is within a second or two. I remember when I was in madrasa and one of my friends, my classmate, he was talking to me, right? And I fell asleep while he was talking to me. And I literally had a full dream. I can't remember the dream now. I remember I kept telling him. And I heard the start of his sentence and the end of his sentence. And I had a full dream within that little time. And I was like, did you just say this? And he's like, yeah, I just said this sentence. And I go, I just had this full dream. And it's a full event that took place. And I told him, and this, this can happen. So time is relevant. So Allah puts barakah in your time. When you say the barakah comes in your time is through worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can do more thing within that show. Same 24 hours, but you're achieving more, getting more out of those 24 hours. Allah puts barakah in all those aspects. So hold on to the sunnah, the ibadah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he says, and you, dear seeker, will not be able to rise to carry out the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until you monitor your heart and limbs in every movement and every breath from the time you wake up and the time you go to sleep. So he said, be mindful of your actions from every lamha, every moment. Every moment, consider it a form of ibadah. Consider, a time of reflection, you're pondering about yourself, how you're spending your day, how you do every step. Then that will draw you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because while you're reflecting, how do I do this, how do I do this? Before you go to sleep, one of the guidance Sufi give is that before you go to sleep, hasibu anfusakum. Take yourself for account. Take yourself for account. Before you go to sleep, how was my day? Before the angels and your Qiyamah, you take it for account. This comes in a hadith, which I don't want to quote because I can't remember at the top of my mind the words. But basically, take yourself for account before you take it for account. So take yourself for account before you take it for account. And these are something. So before you go to sleep, just have a few minutes of reflection, how you spent your day and how you could have made it better, what wrongs you did, how you can improve. Inshallah, we'll leave it out there. But from next lesson, I'll try to go at a slightly faster pace, inshallah, with the books. But the key thing is, once I addressed my teacher and I said, we never got to finish the book. And he said, it's not about finishing the book, it's about absorbing what you've done. So one thing is reading a book, one is studying a book. Inshallah, we're going to study the books and not read. So even if we don't complete all of them, we will know that we learned a lot through the journey, through the course of this journey through the books, inshallah. May Allah give us the tawfiq to complete them anyway. آمين. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم.
آمين.
اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.